Hey guys, and welcome to Mindful and Sober. So today, I wanted to talk a little bit about my sobriety journey, just a little backstory of my life and kind of how I got to this point. So, like I had mentioned, I got sober a year and about a little over a year and 8 months ago. And it completely changed my life. I jumped into an AA program. Although my addiction was to so many different things, alcohol, meth, mostly meth at the end of my addiction, or active addiction, GHB, a bunch of things. Really, it was really whatever I could get to feel better and escape, I would just want. But kind of just to circle back a little bit. So, I I like to say that my addiction started way before my first drink. I grew up feeling never a part of, feeling always slightly off, a little bit different than everyone else, never really feeling like I was good enough. I grew up in a neighborhood, mostly white neighborhood. I grew up in a predominantly, I would say, kind of upper middle class neighborhood, and my family was very middle class. And so we didn't have as much money as other people. I was pretty much the only Mexican, Filipino kid in the school, aside from my best friend who was also Mexican. But there just weren't really anyone that looked like me kind of growing up. And so I always felt just different. I was also gay, and I knew that from a really young age. And so I felt not only it was like the fucking trifecta, like I was gay, I was not wide enough. My parents didn't have as much money. And so I always constantly felt like I was the outsider. I learned from a really young age to try to get validation, or to fill that void of self-loathing. The only way I felt that I could fill it, or fill that cup up, was through external validation from other people. And so I always really kind of compartmentalized my life. I was one person to, one group of friends, another person to another group of friends, and then another person to another group of friends, not really able to ever have that kind of emotional congruence, not really ever able to feel like I could be who I am authentically ever. Like I've never felt like that I've been able to express that. And I felt the more I did that, the more I was disconnected from who I inherently was. And growing up in a conservative Catholic family, I also thought in my head, or created this narrative, that if anyone knew I was gay, then I would be outcasted by my family and friends. I remember growing up as a kid, crying, going to sleep, thinking that I was going to hell while everyone else was going to heaven. And I think that was just really hard. That was really hard for me growing up, because I didn't really have anyone to talk to. And so I found that the only thing that made me feel good was the validation of other people. So, people pleasing, doing things that I thought other people wanted me to do. The first time I had my first drink was in high school. It's Bacardi 151, and it was disgusting. But I remember having it in the back of my friend's car, and remember blacking out that night. And that was really the first time that I felt like I could ever just breathe. Like, I just felt like a relief kind of come over me. Because for so long before then, I was just so calculated with everything. Like, am I acting too gay? Like, do my friends know? Like, do I have enough girlfriends and guy friends? Like, do I have, like, am I presenting masculine enough? Like, and it was just so hard. Like, it was just so weighted. My life just felt so weighted. I felt like in high school I partied pretty much as, the average person. Like, and that was kind of the only space that I felt like I could be social was when I was drunk or I was incredibly insecure, or kind of closed off. Aside from the few friends that I had, or the friends that I did have, I was always a nice kid. So like I always, was around people and had friends. But I never felt that I truly connected with anyone because I felt like I was just hiding this secret, that was just following my whole life. And that if anyone knew, then no one would like me. So I ended up moving away, and went to school in San Luis Obispo. And it was weird because everyone at that time was partying, just as much as me. They, would party hard, and then we would all wake up with hangovers and be fine, and everything would be fine. And that was kind of the norm. And so it didn't really seem like anything was that substantially off. Like, it seemed that like we were all doing the same thing, so it was fine. And I'm sure there were plenty of people who weren't doing it, but I just didn't want to be around those people because then it really kind of made me reflect on myself and who I am. And then, it was always just really intimidating to be around people who didn't drink or could be social in drinking settings, without alcohol, because I was never able to do that. I was still holding on to that secrecy of not coming out, trying to like pray the gay away, but that never happening. That never happened, or was never happening. And so, it was always this constant need of wanting to be someone else, of feeling I wasn't good enough, of feeling that like I needed validation from other people just to have some self-worth, because internally I hated myself. And it was like I was just living this huge lie. And so the guilt, shame, and kind of stigma just kind of like enveloped who I was. And the only relief from that was alcohol, was drinking. Like, I wanted to be right before blackout. Like, that was the best space for me because it was when I just didn't care about anything. I was introduced to cocaine in high school. I was introduced to cocaine in San Luis Obispo. So when I was away, and this is kind of how my brain worked. So me and a friend went over to our dealer and we were like, okay, let's try this for the first time. We're never going to do this again. And so, we went and, we're like, oh my gosh, can you believe like what people would think if we were doing this? Like, this is just so bad. Like, I can't believe we're doing this, but we're never going to do this again. Like, we're just going to try it out once and never do it again. And, that next day I was back at the dealers, like wanting more. And that's kind of like that is how my mind, was warped into thinking, was always needing to be higher, always searching for this feeling of good, and never feeling like I attained it. So always needing more, whatever that was. So I ended up, not doing well in school, moved back, and then ended up moving down to LA. And at that time, I was working in West Hollywood at like a promoting at some of the bars in West Hollywood as a promoter for this alcohol. It was completely disgusting. It was called White Eye. And we would go to different bars, and it was just a shit show. Like, everyone around me was drinking. My manager got a DUI leaving one of the bars one night. We passed out shots, and I remember like me and my friends would just be taking them all and just be blacked out most of the events. And still kind of living this compartmentalized life, because my friends back at home, my straight friends, my parents, my family, they didn't know I was living kind of this dual life. They just thought I was going to school, finishing up school in LA. But little did they know I had only gone to class 3 class periods that whole quarter. And in LA was the first time that I was introduced to meth. And it was like the first time I tried it was like almost like this liberating feeling, this sexually liberating feeling. Because I also had so much anxiety and stress growing up really Catholic around sexuality and around sex. And so meth was kind of that freedom to do whatever without any repercussions in that moment, without the voice in the back of my head saying, this is bad, you're going to hell, this is evil, without that loop playing. And so, for the next, several years, every time I would drink, I would get the urge, because that's when I used the first time, was when I was drinking. I would get the urge to use meth, and it was almost like they were linked together at that moment, the first time I did it. And I did it occasionally because the come downs were awful. Oh my gosh, like I felt like I was dying, anxiety, and I already like suffered from anxiety. And the only thing to alleviate that was Xanax. And so I would take a Xanax, and that was kind of like the cycle. I would drink, get blacked out, find a dealer on like Grindr or something, and then go use whatever happened would happen. And then that next morning, it would be about a month of pure depression. And I would need anxiety, or I would need like anxiety pills, Xanax, whatever, to allow me to get through the day and the weeks after that. It was really interesting because my hangovers, like my mental hangover, lasted exactly a week, all the time, almost to the hour. And then feeling normal again. And that was like when I would like stop crying, because I would cry through the whole week. And then I would feel social or normal at that month mark. And so it was this weird kind of staggered 1 week and then 1 month. So my hangovers really lasted like a whole month long. And that lasted over several years. I was still kind of borderline able to keep jobs. I mean, there was a job I got fired from. I was working in finance at the time because I wouldn't come in. I would lie about, where I was, calling in sick a lot, not being able to keep up with my workload, and anxiety. And so, I really wasn't able to sustain, that work really. And then COVID hit, and COVID was a huge turning point in my meth addiction. I ended up not having to be accountable anymore because I was working remote. And so when we would have Zooms, I would just be smoking out of, the meth pipe. I would be high pretty much all day. I would I would, log in late. I would wake up in a frantic kind of episode, like, and it would be noon, and I'd miss meetings. And um, then I was finally let go by my employer. And things got considerably worse after that. Because really no longer, I had no responsibility. And so I was introduced to GHB at that point, and that incorporated that GBL, all that. And my life started to spiral. I ended up meeting a doctor, and he persuaded me to, although I at the point was so gone that I, was totally up for it, to start doing meth intravenously. And so that was, another big turning point. My addiction, got increasingly worse. Started to use all day, started to lose all my friends, lost my car, lost my apartment, wasn't working, wasn't hireable. And it was almost to a point where I was like, this is how life is going to be. I would, go to cheap motels in San Francisco. I was in Northern California, and just pretty much use all day and meet, not good people that were not good influences. And there were many moments, at that point where I was like, wow, how did I get to this in my life? Like, this is so far than anything I imagined. It was one of those things where it's like, how did this happen? Like, what is going on? But I couldn't get out of it. I ended up overdosing a few times. And the pain started to become unbearable. It was, I knew that something needed to change, but there was a fear that, like, I didn't know how to get out. And it was the first time, that kind of lasted. I ended up dating someone who was also a big user. And that lasted, about a year. And so I was not working for a couple of years, no job, living at my parents' house, and, shooting up often, taking G often. And that was my routine, not really knowing how to get out, not thinking that there was a solution. The last night that I used, I ended up in the ER room, and I was in the room, and it was separated by a curtain like this. And on the other side, the lady said, God has always loved you, and God is walking with you right now. And I get chills kind of talking about that, because my relationship with God had been tarnished. Like, I thought that God hated me. I thought that God turned his back on me. And so I just remember being in that room crying and praying with her. And I really think that it was a divine intervention. And that night, something changed in my heart and in my mind. Like, I fell to my knees for the first time and cried out to God to help me. And cried out to my family to help. And that next day, I got into an AA meeting, and the pain was just so excruciating that I felt like I could no longer lie, cheat my way out of the reality of where I was. Like, I felt like there was a big mirror, and I was looking at myself, And I had to face reality. And so I jumped in to the program 100%. And I never looked back. I, what every person told me in those rooms, I held on tightly to. And I'm so grateful that I did. I wasn't working also, so I was able to do, meetings, several meetings. I did, 200 meetings in 90 days. I read the big book. I got a sponsor, and we started working the steps. And that really, changed my life, because I could finally see for the first time that there was a solution. And I felt like everyone in these rooms started to kind of like almost like like a baby elephant, where they all kind of surround you and protect you. That's what I felt from these people. And like, it's weird because that's something that I've never, I mean, my parents and family loved me, but like, this is something different when people that don't know you, come together and want to protect you. Like, it's really a beautiful healing thing. And so in the rooms, I also like came out, and it was the first time I was ever able to say like, I am gay out loud to people. And that was really healing, although really uncomfortable. And that's what this program has been. This program has really been about, and my sobriety journey has really been about accepting who I am and loving who I am, and putting people in my life that love me for who I am. It's about kind of unraveling all those secrets, and being more transparent with people, opening up my heart, kind of breaking down all those walls that I carried my whole life, and really kind of learning how to be a human being. I felt like for so long, I didn't really know how to be a person, and this has really helped me and provided me the tools to be a good human being. I started, I secretaried my own meetings. So I, was doing that. I was going to morning meetings every day, and I was starting to do a lot of fellowshipping, and had to cut ties with everyone that I used with, was really only hanging out with my family and my, AA family. I was going to hospitals and institutions to talk, and really I've had to change everything about my life. And I am just so grateful that I did. Like, my life is so much different than what it was a few years ago. Like I'd mentioned, I'm in grad school to be a therapist. I moved down to West Hollywood. I have a sponsor down here. I go to meetings all the time. Here I have a group of guys that I connect with. And although it's still really uncomfortable and it's something that I'm still getting used to, I know it's in the right direction, because I felt so much just freedom, and being around like validating people and being around people that I identify with, like that is so important. Like in terms of like alcoholics or alcoholism, and then in terms of being gay, like all those things have been really, really important for me in my healing process. And I'm starting to live authentically, and it's just been such a great, great journey. I'm so glad that I decided blindly to just jump into AA. It was so scary. It's been really hard. There have been meetings that I cried in. I've shared a lot of uncomfortable feelings and emotions that I've always kind of been running away. I'm learning to tap into those. I'm realizing that that's part of the human experience for me. Like, I never wanted to not feel good, but I'm learning that that is part of just being human. And, you know, I have so much hope now. I have a spiritual, um, I have a relationship with my higher power, which is insane because I was like, if anyone had ever said that to me, I'd be like, there's no way. There's no way. Life is just good. Life is easier. Life is still hard, but like I'm able to work through all those things without alcohol, without drugs. Um, and so if you know you're watching and think that, you know, there is no solution, I just want you to know that there is, you know, find a community, find a group, find people that, you know, are supporting you and that you can identify with and that you can connect with. Um, I'm realizing how lonely I was. And that was kind of like this driver in using. And these programs are kind of built in a way that foster relationships with people, that teach you how to be of service of other people, that teach you how to have integrity, that teach you how to just live life, you know? And life is so much better without drugs and alcohol. Like, it's still fun. Like, it's still like a vibe. Like, it's still good. All these things are good. And so I just want to say, like, if you're struggling, hang in there. Call someone, talk to someone, um, because we can't do this alone. So I wanted to thank you. I also want to thank you for listening to my story. And I look forward to kind of building this, you know, this YouTube out so you can get to know me a little bit more. All right. Bye, everyone.